If you're lucky enough to have access to drinkable water, if you can get it with the push of a button, if you've never had to boil or collect water just to drink what your body requires, do you appreciate it? Buddhists have a concept called appreciation of the non-toothache. When your tooth doesn't hurt, you don't think twice about it. But when your tooth aches, all you can do is how much you wish your tooth didn't hurt. Yet you shared no appreciation for your teeth beforehand. The question I ask of you is, if you suddenly lost access to drinkable water, would you appreciate what you have now? My name is Peter Wynn. My parents are boat people, refugees from Vietnam. I am the first person on either side of my family to be born on American soil. Their immigration story, to me, is as American as apple pie, which is funny to say because my parents don't like pie very much. I believe that this country was built on the idea that every person has the birth-given right to live freely in a land where opportunity is abundant. Because guess what? There are plenty of places where freedom is not an option. Not every place in this world has access to drinkable water. The fall of Saigon, April 30th, 1975. An event that changed the lives of 130,000 refugees of war, and hundreds of thousands more to follow. On this day, North Vietnamese forces made their way into the Vietnamese capital, secured strategic points, and merely by afternoon of the following day, raised their communist flag over the city. They demanded the immediate withdrawal of all United States forces. In the months prior, evacuations proceeded throughout the city. The final days of Saigon would bring about Operation Frequent Wind. Those to be evacuated were U.S. citizens and Vietnamese officials with U.S. ties. The complication lied with identifying Vietnamese officials from mere commoners just trying to flee the country. Furthermore, these officials demanded to bring their families, adding an average of 7 more individuals per person. The evacuation quickly evolved into a panic of flight or death. Of the 7,000 people evacuated that day, 70% were undocumented Vietnamese refugees. The diaspora of South Vietnam had begun. On May 28th, 1975, weeks after the fall of Saigon, President Gerald Ford signed and ordered the Indochina Migration and Refugee Assistance Act, which allowed war refugees entrance into the United States. It is because of this act and American compassion that I am able to tell this story from American soil. Assisted by the U.S. military and accepted by the U.S. government, we were given the freedom of American opportunity. This act remained operational decades after the Vietnam War. Of the 48 million homeland Vietnamese, 231,000 would escape communist containment and make it to the United States in the 1980s. My parents were 2 of these people. Boat people, a nickname given to people like my parents who decided there was nothing left for them in Vietnam. So they escaped by underground railroad along the countryside rivers leading to the Pacific or through the jungles of Laos and Cambodia. The goal was to get to one of the refugee camps in Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, the Philippines, Singapore. From there, President Ford's decree would grant them passage to the United States. So, on May 28th, 1981, my father, Wayne Van Phuc, and my mother, Wayne Pan, along with a dozen of my family members, escaped from a small countryside village called Long Swing. It was the dead of night.
as they boarded a small fishing boat anchored in a stream. The stream led to the Mekong River, which emptied into the Pacific. Along with my parents were 3 sets of aunts and uncles, my mom's youngest brother, and 3 of my young cousins, ages 5, 3, and 1. 100 people crammed into this small boat, only about 45 feet long, packed so tightly you could barely sit, much less lie down. With such limited space, the passengers were not allowed to bring luggage, so they brought only what they could carry. Their most valuable possessions, gold, jewelry, money, their entire life savings. A few pieces of clothing and some small rations of food. My grandfather owned a sugarcane farm, so my aunt and my mom brought sugar balls made out of sugar and lemon juice. Not much food to bring on a journey that they had no idea how long they'd be on. As the boat gave into the stream, and as they slowly reached the Pacific, suddenly they started to take rifle fire from the Communist Coast Guards. The pilot gunned the engine full throttle and then cowardly retreated below deck. Screams of despair came from below as the tragedy of the situation dawned upon the refugees. Heads ducked down as the boat accelerated blindly forward. My father recalls seeing red streaks of fire as bullets whistled past the canopy. A short while later, the bullets ceased. Miraculously, there was no casualties, no damage to the boat. Did they mean to take deadly aim, or merely to warn and frighten? One thing was sure, they had successfully escaped Vietnam, and now they would stand the trials of the open seas. Seasickness was a big problem. For many, this was their first time on the open ocean. Also, they tried to void themselves in the water, but during inclement weather, they had to do it inside the boat. It didn't take long before the interior did become overwhelmed with the stench of vomit and feces. People constantly retreated on deck for a short reprieve of fresh air. Everyone was hungry all the time. They tried to cook rice with seawater, but that just made the rice inedible. My mother, out of the kindness of her heart, and unable to see people suffer, doled out the remainder of the family's sugar balls, leaving themselves nothing left to eat. Others hid their food and hoarded their rations to themselves. Stealing would become natural once desperation settled in. Oh, and drinking water was kept in old fuel barrels. My father recalls scooping metal shavings and oil remnants just to dole out water, a spoonful at a time. With 100 people on board, everybody only got a couple spoonfuls at a time. Days passed. There wasn't much to do except remain stationary in the cramped space below. My aunt developed sores on her thighs from sitting on the wooden surfaces. In bad weather, the ocean would take the boat up to the apex of a wave and then drop it down again and again. My father recalls seeing large waves like tall buildings falling on them over and over. On their 4th day at sea, my father was pouring water into the engine. The engine had been running non-stop since they reached the Pacific. As he poured water, the chain driving the shaft of the propeller broke and fell into the ocean. They had another engine, but no one could get it working. So they took large sticks and poles and large sheets of cloth to try to make a sail. And that didn't work either. From there, it seemed like they bobbed up and down in the same place for days. They were completely at the mercy of Mother Nature. That night, on their 5th night at sea, a row of lights appeared, glimmering in the distance across the glass surface. A caravan of freighters was passing right in front of them. At last, after days of treading the ocean alone, finally other signs of life. People screamed, hope gleaming in their eyes, "Go on! Go on, Marina!" But it was no use. There was no way anyone could see them through the darkness. So they had to make a signal. So people donated the clothes that they weren't wearing, gathered them on deck. They took the poles that they tried to make sails out of, wrapped the clothes on one end, lit them on fire, and held the signal high up into the sky. As the fire burned out, the refugees quickly tried to make another signal. And as they tried to signal the boats, the wake from the freighters pushed them further and further away. Slowly the lights faded, taking their newfound hope into the abyss. The night passed, and so did the freighters. They will never know that the freighters truly did not see their SOS, or saw them, but would not help. My parents were one of the first people to donate their clothes. It was the last of their belongings. My parents tell this story. They say they came to America with nothing but the clothes on their backs. Seasickness and hunger and thirst were difficult problems, but minuscule compared to tragedies suffered by other refugee boats. Many perished, and death came by many means. Hunger and thirst would kill, as would infection. Boats would capsize. The exact number of people who died in their attempts to flee can never accurately be determined. Some estimates puts the number somewhere between 200 and 400,000. Some reports even say 70% of those who tried to escape died. But there was another killer out there on the open seas, and it claimed many lives and destroyed many families. Pirates. These pirates were typically Thai men. They patrolled the South China Sea looking for refugee boats. They would board the vessels, pilfer the valuables, and rape their women. In order to instill fear and boast superiority, they would defile the women in front of everyone on board, including their husbands and children. Children witness atrocities no child should ever have to endure. Once the pirates had their fill, they left the people, broken, ashamed, and in disgust of their own helplessness. The boats that met this fate rarely dealt with one raid. Once the pirates found you, they had you marked, and they would return again and again and again. The people on these boats were trapped between the water and their assailants. Many committed suicide, unable to cope with the shame and tragedy. Just before high noon, on their 6th day at sea, another ship was spotted. And this time, it was understood that the ship had spotted them. As my parents came on deck, they were greeted with a magnificent symbol of savior, the USS Shasta. With a length of 149 feet and a beam of 63 feet, it was by far the largest vessel the refugees had ever seen. It felt like they had floated up to a giant skyscraper. As cheers of joy came from below, my parents watched as a small lifeboat released from the ship and slowly approached their boat. A captain boarded their boat and spoke to the refugees. "We're going to need everyone down below. We're going to tie you up to our lifeboat and taxi you to the ship." And all the refugees stared at him. Only my father spoke English well enough to translate. Once aboard the Shasta, cots and blankets were laid out, and the refugees stretched their legs and lied down on a surface that didn't bob up and down for the first time in a week. Food was immediately brought out. My father ate an apple for the very first time on that deck. You see, apples are not indigenous to Vietnam, and they were only eaten by the rich during New Year's. He recalls it as the most delicious piece of sustenance he had ever consumed. My father found that officer and told him in the best English that he could muster, "Thank you. If you not pick us up, we all die." The Shasta was commuting from Hong Kong to Singapore when they picked up my parents' boat. That afternoon, they picked up a second refugee boat, full with another 100 Vietnamese. And the crew treated them all like guests, with complete respect. The Shasta was their new home on the open ocean, and they were free to roam about as they pleased. My dad and my uncles roamed about the labyrinth of halls like children, eyes wide, gasping and gaping at the hardware and the technology, enthralled by the sheer size of the ship. The Shasta was joyfully infected with non-English speaking refugees, cavorting around like jovial mice, just happy to be alive. On June 6th, 1981, the Shasta docked at the Hawkins Road Refugee Camp in Sembawang, Singapore. The 25 houses of the camp were completely full, housing over 5,000 refugees. This would be my parents' new home for the next year. By June of 1982, my father's wife's sister sponsored my parents to Denver. Shortly after my parents finally arrived in America, my mother found out she was pregnant with me. I was born in November of 1982. I'm the first person on either side of my family to be born on American soil. I hold a certain prophetic significance with my entrance in life. My parents took deadly risks, endured traumatic hardships, all for me. Perhaps there is a pressure not to squander the gift of being American. I thank them with every glass of water that I drink. Like most Americans, I'm just lucky enough to be born in America. Those who fought to get here, those are the real Americans. 1 month after I was born, the blizzard of '82 hit Denver. Nearly 3 feet of snow immobilized the entire city. Our first home consisted of a mattress in a closet, sharing a house with several other immigrants. My parents recall lying in their closet bed, holding their 1 month newborn son, seeing snow for the first time, and completely content with the decisions that they've made. Decisions which allow for myself and my brother, who would come 8 years later, infinite opportunity, freedom. In the 80s and 90s, the Vietnamese people quickly assimilated into the working class. We quickly gained the reputation for intelligence, hard work, diligence, and humility. In our first years, we didn't merely assimilate, we thrived. My people are very hardworking. We are entrepreneurs. Many open up their own businesses, dry cleaners, Asian grocery markets, convenience stores, liquor stores, nail salons, and of course, pho restaurants. Today, nearly 1.3 million Vietnamese live in the United States. We are the 6th largest foreign-born population in America. The story of my people is one of triumph. It is a proud story where our American brethren came to our aid and fought alongside us against tyranny. And when we couldn't win, they took us in with open arms. They gave us a second chance. they granted for my parents their blessings of liberty for themselves and their posterity. Me. We Vietnamese are here. As we give rise to the next generation, we deepen our roots in the rich, free soil. We profit from the freedom to choose the trajectory of our own lives. We cherish liberties we would not have had our parents decided not to get on that boat. With our children, the task of maintaining tradition in the modern West will be our challenge. As they profit and benefit in the wake of their grandparents' bravery, we will continue to remind them of their ancestry. We will tell them the stories of the boat people and how they came to live in this amazing land. Cheers.
UNAVSA 2017. You guys awake? We had too much fun last night. I was watching you guys. You all look crazy. Like, these kids are gonna get me killed. So my name is Peter, and in case there's any visually impaired or you can't tell from my name or my accent, I am Asian. Race is biological and ethnicity is cultural, and the ethnicity I identify with is Vietnamese, unless I am filling out government papers. If I'm filling out government papers, my ethnicity is non-Hispanic. And the government only recognizes 3 ethnicities, which makes me sad: Hispanic, non-Hispanic, and I'd rather not say. But let's face it, if you choose I'd rather not say, you're probably Hispanic. What is the socially, politically correct way to ask somebody's heritage? Anyways, I'll tell you how not to ask it. I've been asked these a few times. I was in a bathroom, and this Italian guy came up to me and said, "So, what kind of Asian are you?" What kind of Asian? The kind that lives and breathes and loves to eat rice. What other kinds are there? He's like, no, man. It's cool. My last name's Mi. Apparently, this guy is an 8th Chinese and 100% ignorant. Another time I was in an elevator. It's all quiet, and this guy finally turns to me and says, "Where are you from?" Which is my favorite question, because I always answer with Denver. He's like, no. Where is your ancestry from? And I was like, "Where do you think?" And he's like, "Mexico." I said, "Yes, ding," and I walked off the elevator. People say weird shit to me when they find out I'm Vietnamese. Like, some people are like, "Oh, you're from Vietnam? Have you ever had pho?" That's like saying, "Oh, you're from Mexico? Have you ever had a burrito?" Or, "Oh, you're from India? Have you ever had dirt?" Another thing I say, usually white women, when they find out I'm Vietnamese, they're like, "Oh my God, you're Vietnamese? Will you come to the nail salon with me?"
What?
And they don't want to get a mani-pedi with me or something. They want me to act as some undercover secret Asian man to sit there and listen to the women doing their nails and tell them if they're talking shit about them. Why? Because white women are narcissists. Like, they ain't talking about you. I can kind of get it, because when Vietnamese women talk, it kind of sounds like they're pissed off. Like, all the time. They're like, "Con nghe con hầm đó, con hầm đó, chứ con cưới á. Ai nói rồi, con hầm đó nó quen lắm á, nó sounds like they're pissed off. To be fair, talking shit about people in a language that they don't understand right in front of them, for Vietnamese, kind of our favorite pastime. One time, me and my brother were at the mall, and we saw a guy with pink shoes. And I turned to him, and I was like, "Cô già, cái thằng Mỹ đen kìa." That guy walked by us, and he was like, "Đúng má, tao mới mua cái này á." Oh, shit. So there's like internal racism within the Vietnamese community too. My family's from the South Vietnam. Holler if your heritage is from the South. Yeah, that's right. Holler if your heritage is from Central Vietnam. Okay, I have to admit it to you guys, I have no idea what the fuck y'all saying. Central Vietnam, they put a heavy tone on every single word. I had this lady come up and "Cái cổ tiêu ở đâu?" Xin lỗi, "Cái cổ tiêu ở đâu?" You're asking me where the toilet is, but it sounds like you're doing it right now. South Vietnamese, we're like American Southerners. We're really lazy with the language, and Northerners like to correct us all the time. Holler if your heritage is from North Vietnam. Yeah, okay, you all might be Winterfell, but we're King's Landing, bitch. And Central, you guys are like Harrenhal. Nobody likes you, and you're haunted. But my cousin's married to a North Vietnamese girl, and she loves to correct my Vietnamese. Like, I'd be telling my kids, I'd be like, in South, we would say, "Mặc quần, mặc dài vô." And she'd be like, "Come, mặc quần, mặc dài vô." And I say, what are you even doing here? Didn't you win the war? That's right. For South Vietnamese, meeting a North Vietnamese in America is like, it's like moving out of the neighborhood because you can't stand your neighbors, only to find out they moved in the same neighborhood as you. What the hell? So, my name is Peter Trinh. If you notice, in my play, I changed my last name to Win. Mostly because Win, well, we're like the Patels of Vietnam, right? Holler if your name's Win. Jesus Christ. And now you guys know why the people in the front desk are like, "I don't know what room you're in." Patels, they like to keep in the family. Like, Patels are like the Indian winds. And Patels only marry other Patels. Like, we make sure that only the Patels be more Patels. And Vietnamese, the winds, we're like, no, we make everybody win. We're like Resident Evil, in fact, everybody. I have two friends, they're two winds, and they got married, and then they had twins. So they got shirts that said, "Win-win situation." Aww. Well, my name's Peter. That's pretty much what I have to, a truncated version of my play Boat Person, which I've been lucky enough to kind of present around the country, around Colorado. Whoop. I have written a second act, and I'm starting to get produced. The second act is my perspective, kind of like life growing up, being in modern America, raised by. So keep a lookout for it. I'm trying to get it picked up and published, and perhaps produced off Broadway and stuff. If your family has interesting stories, I always love it, because I mean, I've been meeting you guys all week or all weekend, and everybody's like, "Oh, from Oklahoma City, I'm from Texas, I'm from LA, I'm from this side." Dude, we fucking splintered into this country, and now as our second or third generation are coming up, like, we're establishing communities You guys, you know, I think this UNAVSA, this is fantastic because you guys come together. You got drunk as hell, and there's a sense of pride because when we go into our own communities, we are our own representatives there. You know, and I think it's great that you guys carry that pride back into your communities and show what's up. Because one thing I've learned doing my play around the country, usually I'm doing it in front of white people. So I have to explain everything. I have white people and I'm like, wow, that happened to you guys? I'm like, yeah, it's called the Vietnam War. Like, oh, that's a place? I thought it was just the name of a war. What the hell? So, the one thing I get when people, they're like, you need to come here and you need to come there. There's these pockets of Vietnamese people there. I'm like, cool. So, if you have a story kind of like that, that's interesting, you know, Vietnamese, when we meet each other, it's never, hey, how'd you get here? Because we got here the same way. It's always, when did you get here? The next project I'm working on, I'm essentially just compiling stories. So if your parents have an interesting story, they'd be open to interview, please come see me and give me your contact information. I'm compiling these stories. Hopefully they'll turn into a book or a documentary or something. But thank you so much for UNAVSA for inviting me. I'm usually known around these parts as Phil's brother. And Phil kind of set this up, so thank you so much to him too. I appreciate you guys. Thank you for listening to me. Have a good one.